So when we think of reparations as a redistribution of wealth, we should actually come out and say that because they have participated for 400 years in a massive redistribution of our wealth, of our sweat equity, of our work, and our money.
And if you're a black person in America, from slavery, from day one, the number of injustices that have held black people back in America amount to an insurmountable, like you look at black people's freedom, you look at black people's land, just land alone. The amount of wealth you can acquire over time if you own land is exponential, because you have the land, you have the fact that you can borrow based on the land, you have the fact that you can use the money that you have borrowed to grow more wealth, you can use it to grow your family's wealth. Just taking that away from black people alone is crippling them. And so you combine that with slavery, and then you look at Jim Crow laws. You didn't let black people in America live in the areas that they wanted to live in. They couldn't get loans from the banks that they wanted to get loans from. And then on top of that, when they started getting the loans from American banks were found to be giving them higher interest rates when in fact they were the same risk as many of the other races that they were giving loans to. So when you combine all of those things, I think it's safe to say that black Americans have a conversation that they need to be having with the United States. Doesn't involve me.
Doesn't involve me.
Doesn't involve white people. It's like, yo, American government, meet the black people. That's it.
Listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. What? Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to US Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black. We pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country to win. You need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Welcome to Reset Race, where we have to keep going through all of these stupid and terrible arguments that people like to bring on to us in this world. So we are back again. I am here, Samantha Angelique, Sam, aka the Khaleesi, and I'm here with my folks. And I'm so excited that we got Dr. J back with us because it's been a while since you've been a guest. So say hi to the people.
Hello, Dr. J. Dr. J on Twitter. You can follow at your own discretion. My page is private, so I will choose whether to follow you back or not. I am not a doctor yet, but I plan on being a doctor one day, and my name is a nickname. So don't at me about any advice or medical advice. I'm not the type of doctor. I'm excited to be back. I know it's been a while. Thank y'all for having me.
We're excited to have you back. All right, next up, Joey.
All hail King Killmonger. Today, I have to be a little sad because this is somebody who I've been I won't say fan of, but fan of his work here and there. But I don't care if I'm a fan of you. You get in the way of reparations, we got to talk.
Even after the Pete Buttigieg thing, I stopped being a fan after the Pete Buttigieg thing. Like, yeah, he's a decent writer, but I saw that he didn't have no backbone then.
I see the position these people end up in. And I'd be wanting to roof everybody black, but y'all be disappointing the hell out of me.
Facts. All right, Mud.
Yeah, they call me Mud. You can find me on my social media of Lineage. That's Instagram and Twitter. I'm still cooking up with the Bitter Dose TV. Let's go ahead and get to the show.
All righty, let's rock it out. Who's reading? Yeah,
Okay,
let's go ahead and get this popping then. What were you gonna say, my dear?
I was gonna ask, I think I noticed that this is the first time I was on here. I'm on here with King Killmonger. Is this my first
Yeah, you've
time
never been on with Joey. Oh, dude, it's been
It's
a
nice
long
to meet
time since you've been on the show because
Yes.
Joey's been part of the show for a while.
Yeah. I've heard. But this is my first time on it with you. So I feel honored.
The honor is all mine.
Oh.
All righty, let's get going. Let's get into Mr. Harriot. Mr. Pete Buttigieg is I didn't mean that, Mr. Buttigieg. but that is a discussion for another time.
Yes,
Today we
it is.
are talking about this bad take.
Jeez Louise.
All righty, then it's all you, sir.
All right, so these are the top 10 reasons why lineage-based reparations is a bad plan by Mr. Michael Harriot. Let's see. On September 30th, 2020, 401 years after human traffickers landed in Virginia and sold Africans to English settlers, California lawmakers passed Assembly Bill 3121. The legislation established a 9-person task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans, with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. On March 29th, the task force voted 5-4 to limit the resulting reparations to Black people whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States, sparking a robust debate about who is deserving of reparations.
I'm going to call the roll for the original motion as stated at the top of the page. Chair Moore. Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Member Bradford.
Aye.
Member Grills.
No.
Member Holder.
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. Member Holder voted yes. Aye.
No.
She voted.
Can you repeat? No.
Thank you. Member Holder voted no. Nay. Member Jones Sawyer. Member Jones Sawyer.
No.
I'm sorry. The paper is hiding you all, so I can't see if you can speak.
No.
Thank you. Member Lewis. I'm sorry. Member Jones Sawyer voted no. Member Lewis.
Aye.
Member Lewis voted aye. Member Tamaki.
No.
Member Tamaki voted nay. Member Montgomery Stepp.
Aye.
Member Montgomery Stepp voted aye. Madam Chair, there were 9 members voting. 5 members voted aye, and 4 members voted nay.
Thank you. There are 9 members voting, 5 members voted aye, 4 members voted nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. So the community of eligibility will be based on lineage determined by an individual being an African American descendant of a chattel enslaved person or the descendant of a free Black person living in the United States prior to the end of the 19th century And we will use this community of eligibility standard to instruct the economic consultant team with next steps. Thank you.
While this may seem like the most straightforward solution, undoing the legacy and history of slavery is not that simple. As a descendant of Africans enslaved in America, I would benefit from this policy. But as someone who was taught race as an economic construct to college students, studied the history of Africans in America, and has written extensively about reparations for 2 decades, I oppose this idea. It is my belief that the foundation of this argument rests on the precepts of white supremacy that created the disparities reparations are intended to erase. Instead of writing an entire treatise, which I've actually done a few times, here are the top 10 reasons why lineage-based reparations are a terrible idea. Anybody got anything, or you want me to continue?
So I guess we should just keep going, because I get what it's just like, oh, well, again, that's that argument that opens it up. It's like the whole, well, all Black people are oppressed in America because, they're Black, but it's like, yeah, but Latinos go through discrimination, and Asians and everybody else. That's not what we're doing this about. It's not about people being mean to us or us facing discrimination. This is about a debt that is owed.
I just want to read this one sentence real quick. It is my belief that the foundation of this argument rests on the precepts of white supremacy that created the disparities reparations are intended to erase. He's not wrong about that, but that's the whole point of reparations, because white supremacy did something to us specifically. So of course it would rest on the precepts of white supremacy. It's supposed to.
Go ahead.
I just hate the argument that if we do reparations specifically to the people that were harmed, over and over and over and over again by this American government, that all of a sudden we are buying into white supremacy. I don't understand how anyone makes that argument. I don't understand where the fuck that comes from. It just seems like some shit Pan-Africanist said once, and then everyone started repeating it, because it makes absolutely no fucking sense.
I'm gonna say this real quick, because I know I'm gonna say it over and over and over and over again on this episode. Nobody on this panel is saying if you got here in 1985 and you're an African person, which you wouldn't call yourself an African, you would call yourself a Nigerian American or Ghanaian American, blah, 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 blah. But let's just say you call yourself an African. If you feel that you have been harmed by the government, and you feel that people in your class, as in Africans who have came here since the 1980s, have been harmed by the US government, y'all need to come together and get your own claim and file it. And me, as a Black American descendant of chattel slavery, will be rooting for you to get your money. That's it. Go ahead, Dr. J. I jumped in before you could talk. I'm sorry.
No. You said it all, everything. Yeah. And I don't understand how people are so obtuse to that idea. I don't understand why people act so funny about that. But I agree with you. Yep, that's the gag.
All right. So number 10 is it's based on white history. First of all, the bill states that more than 4 million Africans and their descendants were enslaved in the United States and the colonies that became the United States from 1619 to 1865, which excludes the descendants of Africans who were enslaved in America by anyone other than the English settlers who showed up a century later. Europeans arrived on the continent with enslaved Africans. We still don't know what happened to the Africans who revolted in the Spanish colony of San Miguel.
It's Guadalupe.
I only speak English, y'all, so this isn't like me belittling nobody. I just never learned this language. All right, so this was in 1526. Historians speculate that they may be living in North Carolina, but are we to think that in 500 years, none of these people made it to California? It also rests.
Wait, hey, hold on. Before you go further.
Mhm.
What?
Some ignorant.
Negro? This is stupid. First of all, this is stupid. First of all, California is California. Talking about in 500 years, none of those people made it to California. California is California. This is why state reparations bills cannot be the begin all end all. We already know that it has to be a federal reparations bill so you can pay everybody who is supposed to be included. But to be like, oh, well, you think for 500 years, it's not California is not trying to repair all Black Americans in the country. California is trying to figure out how to do some type of repair for the people who are California residents. And they're still trying to see if they're going to do people who have moved out of California. So this already kind of seems like you're trying to throw out like a dumb argument. Like, I don't know, like it's a poisoning the well kind of thing, but it's just stupid. Like, who said that nobody made it from North Carolina to California in 500 years? Like, my people are from Arkansas and we've been in California since the 50s.
Well, I mean, beyond that, like within 500 years, they haven't mixed with the descendants of slaves, the English slaves, or even taking it even further. If we look at what California determined for the eligibility, they're just saying you had to be here before the 1900s. So that would include these motherfuckers. This is a non-argument.
You know who it wouldn't include though? Me, because I'm not from California. None of my people are, and I'm okay with that.
Same.
Me too.
I don't feel left out of this. I support my people from California getting their reparations.
Thank you.
And I don't need a check. Not from y'all.
That's it. It's that easy. All right, let's keep going. I'm sorry. I just caught that part when he was like, you think nobody made it to California? I thought he was trying to do this as an to talk about lineage based. It shouldn't be like it for federal reparations. But you're like arguing against the task force of California too? You sound like a goofball.
I thought he was smarter.
He is stupid. Continue.
All right. So it also rests on the tenuous definition of descendant and the actual definition of African American, which doesn't actually exist because race is just something white people made up.
Okay, stop. I'm sorry, y'all. Stop. Quit being like race is just something that white people made up. Yes, race is a social construct that has real life consequences. Our lineage / race had consequences for us. It still has consequences. Where you'd be like, oh, well, it's just some shit that white people made up. You pushing people into our lineage that are not our lineage is what white is. You're basically flattening Blackness as if white people did. You can't do that. You don't get to erase us ethnically. So it's like it's something white people made up. That doesn't matter. Race is something that's made up, but ethnicity is ethnicity. Like, cultures are real. I don't understand why nobody understands that except when you start talking about Black people, nobody realizes that Black people have their own culture. Black Americans who descend from chattel slavery. We are not Africans. I'm sorry. Like, I've been spending time with my 85-year-old grandmother and my damn near 80-year-old great aunt. Like, they don't call themselves Africans. Right. They don't look at themselves as Africans. So how you gonna tell my elders that we all the same when they understand that a lot of these folks just got here like 30 years ago? Sorry, go ahead, y'all.
I'm trying to understand what exactly makes the definition of descendant tenuous. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, you're either the descendant of people who went through this stuff or you're not. Like, right. That part is not even like something to argue about. Now, if he wants to talk about, race being a social construct, that's fine, but it still doesn't change the fact that the society used that construct against certain people during a certain time period. So therefore, we can still use that same concept for the people who went through that to actually be, more specific about these remedies. Other than that, I don't know what the fuck he's talking about.
I do. He says race is just something white people made up, and I agree, which is why we need lineage-based reparations. Race doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
Thank you for that kind introduction. My honor to be able to testify before you. I'm here to address one question. How to structure reparations in the way most likely to be upheld by the courts? My conclusion is that reparation is most likely to be upheld by the courts if it's structured in a race-neutral fashion. That is, it's most likely to be upheld by the courts if reparations are for those who were descendants of slaves rather than for all who are Black. In the United States, under current constitutional law, and in California under Proposition 209, laws that give a preference on the basis of race are either inherently suspect or perhaps per se illegal. And therefore the question is, how can reparations be structured in a way that would get through judicial review? Let me talk about two sources of law, the California Constitution and then the United States Constitution, to explain why I've come to this conclusion, then briefly respond to some of the questions that you might have about the position I'm taking, and then answer anything that you want to ask of me. The first source of law that you need to focus on is the California Constitution, what was commonly referred to as Proposition 209. It was called the California Civil Rights Initiative. It says that the state of California and all of its political subdivisions cannot discriminate or give preference on the basis of race in education, employment, or contracting. And so if reparations are given on the basis of race, that anyone who meets the definition of being Black is entitled to reparations because all have suffered from the legacy of slavery, I don't think it could survive a challenge under Proposition 209. Now, Proposition 209 is limited to education, contracting, and employment. And if the reparations were not in those areas, then Proposition 209 wouldn't be a problem. But if it's in education, or if it is in contracting, or if it is employment, then anything that is deemed as a preference on the basis of race is per se impermissible. This is different than what I'll talk about in a moment, the United States Constitution, where there is the possibility of racial preferences being constitutional. Under the California Constitution, they're not. There's relatively little case law about Proposition 209, but that which exists broadly defines what is preference. It would be hard to imagine that there'd be a reparation system that was racially defined that wouldn't run afoul of this. Now, as I said in my introduction, if this were defined as a benefit for those who are descendants of slaves, it would certainly largely overlap with race, but it would not entirely overlap with race. There are Blacks who are not descendants of slaves. There's a very small population that were enslaved that wouldn't be Blacks. So I think there'd be a strong argument based on Proposition 209 that limiting reparations to those who are descendants of slaves would not run afoul of Prop 209, whereas if this is defined in a race-based manner, then I think Proposition 209 would be a substantial problem. But assume that Proposition 209 wasn't a problem. Imagine this wasn't reparation about education, contracting, and employment, in which case it would be entirely outside the scope of Proposition 209. There is still the United States Constitution. And the Supreme Court has said now, for over 30 years, that racial classifications benefiting minorities, just like racial classifications that disadvantage minorities, are highly suspect. The Supreme Court has said that racial classifications benefiting minorities, like those disadvantaging minorities, must meet strict scrutiny. As I'm sure the Commission knows, strict scrutiny means that the government action has to be necessary to achieve a compelling government purpose. And the Supreme Court has been very restrictive as to what counts as a compelling purpose in this context. Quite relevant to your Commission, the Supreme Court has said that remedying the history of past discrimination is not a compelling purpose sufficient to justify remedial action. There was a Supreme Court case, Wygant versus Jackson Board of Education. The Jackson, Michigan school system had recently hired a number of black teachers when it needed to have layoffs. It decided to fire white teachers with more seniority. Their argument was that this was to remedy a long history of race discrimination. They also said how important it was to provide role models for black children in the schools. The Supreme Court declared this unconstitutional, and the court's opinion was explicit that there cannot be preferences based on race on the grounds of remedying the history of discrimination. Or there's the case J. Croson versus City of Richmond. Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the old Confederacy, set aside 30% of its public works monies for minority-owned businesses. They did so because even though at that time Richmond was a city that was more than 50% black, racial minorities and blacks were receiving only about 1% of the public works contracts. But the Supreme Court declared this unconstitutional, and the court said the long history of race discrimination, including in Richmond, Virginia, didn't justify the preference that was given on the basis of race. There is, so now, only one area where the United States Supreme Court has allowed race-conscious remedies, and that's in the area of higher education. In a series of cases, the Supreme Court has said that college universities have a compelling interest in a diverse student body, that college universities may use race as one factor among many in admissions decisions to enhance diversity to benefit minorities. This was initially articulated by Justice Lewis Powell in an opinion in Regents University of California versus Bakke in 1978. It was reaffirmed by the Supreme Court in 2003 in Grutter versus Bollinger, and then reaffirmed most frequently and recently in 2016 in Fisher versus Texas at Austin. But in the Fisher litigation, the Supreme Court made clear that college universities could use race as a factor in admissions decisions only if they could prove there was no other way to achieve diversity. Now, it's worth noting that the states can do what would be thought of as protecting more rights than the U.S. Constitution. And so California can prohibit affirmative action even though it would be permissible under the U.S. Constitution. That's exactly what Proposition 209 does. But even as to this one area where racial classifications benefit minority have been allowed, the law, I think, is about to change. The Supreme Court has granted review in two cases for next October, one involving Harvard University and one involving the University of North Carolina. And the issue in those two cases is whether the Supreme Court's going to overrule the earlier decisions allowing affirmative action. Why two cases? Well, the Constitution applies only to the government. Private activities don't have to comply with the Constitution. Harvard is a private university. But Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act applies to entities that receive federal funds, including private entities. Harvard obviously receives federal funds. So the issue in the Harvard case is whether or not race-conscious affirmative action in admissions violates Title VI. In the University of North Carolina case is whether it violates equal protection. It is impossible to count 5 votes on the current Supreme Court that would uphold the Harvard and the North Carolina affirmative action programs. Chief Justice John Roberts, been outspoken in his opposition to all forms of affirmative action. And parents involved in community schools for Seattle Schools Number 1, 2007, he explicitly took the position that the Constitution requires that the government be colorblind. Justice Thomas and Alito have taken the position, and with 3 additional conservative justices, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, hard to imagine the Supreme Court doing anything but reversing those earlier decisions. Well, what does that mean in the context of the discussion of reparations? If reparations are framed in a race-based manner, then they would have to meet strict scrutiny, necessary to achieve a compelling purpose. And remember, the Supreme Court has said remedying a history of discrimination is not regarded by the court as a compelling government purpose. And so I think it would be very hard to convince this Supreme Court or lower courts following Supreme Court precedent that a race-based reparation program would be constitutional. I think the best hope with regard to the Supreme Court is a program that is facially race neutral, that being framed in terms of a benefit for descendants of slaves would be much more likely to be upheld. There are precedents for reparations, as this commission well knows. For example, there was the reparations provided to those who had been in Japanese internment camps. But it's important to note that that was based on people who had suffered a particular injury, and they were each given $20,000 in an apology during the Reagan administration. It wasn't anyone who was of a particular race. I think it would be hard to convince this court that a race-based program met strict scrutiny was constitutional. On the other hand, what's more encouraging to me that I cannot think of any instance where the Supreme Court has struck down a race-neutral law on the ground that it has a benefit or even a targeted benefit for minorities. As an example, some states have adopted admissions programs where they take top 10% of classes across the state. And this was undoubtedly adopted to benefit minorities, and it had the effect of benefiting minorities. And yet the Supreme Court, at least called dicta, has indicated that would be constitutional, even though the purpose, the effect would be to benefit minorities. So I come to you as the messenger. I am not defending the law as set out by the Supreme Court. It is certainly not the law as I would want it to be. And I completely understand the benefits with regard to praising reparations and framing it in terms of those who are Black. I am simply addressing the question, what is most likely to be held by the courts? Let me just respond to three things that might be in mind, and then I'll take your questions. One thing that might be in mind is there is a tremendous difficulty in proving that someone is a descendant of slaves. This will be very under-inclusive in that way. As this commission knows so well, records are incomplete. And so the cost of what I'm suggesting is that many who are deserving would not get benefits. And I think if you go in the direction of providing that those who are descendants of slaves would get reparations, how to deal with the incomplete records and the lack of documentation becomes very important. A second concern is, as articulated by the prior speaker, all Blacks in this country have suffered from the legacy of slavery. All should therefore be able to benefit from reparations. I think that is a compelling argument, but I don't think the United States Supreme Court would find that to be a compelling argument. If you look at the cases I mentioned, where the court says remedying the past history of discrimination is not a compelling interest, I don't see a way of persuading the current Supreme Court, that matter the lower courts, of that. And a final criticism of what I'm suggesting is that there's still the purpose of benefiting Blacks. The effect is still to benefit Blacks. Might a court not strike it down on that basis? And yes, I think that's a risk, even of a reparations law that's framed in terms of benefiting descendants of slaves, but I think it is far more likely to be upheld than a law that is framed just in terms of race. So again, wanted to address just one question for you, how to frame reparations in the way most likely to be upheld by the courts. And I'm glad to take any questions.
Race doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
No, and he proved that in his debate that he did with Marcel. But moving on.
And again, I'm still aligned from Marcel in that debate, even though we have all used this one. But I heard he was beating Michael Harriot over the head with it. So are you saying that we should pay Jewish people who were not descendants of the Holocaust? Because it didn't work like that. Only people got that money were people who went through it or who were descendants of. They did not give it to all Jewish people.
I don't understand why they would even limit it to Jewish people. According to this argument, it doesn't make any sense. Race is just a thing white people made up. They should just give that money to everybody.
I mean, and it's kind of like it's white history to erase all other people that were, who went through harms by the Nazis, who did not actually receive reparations. But it's hard to have these conversations because people aren't honest about like all the nuances of it. When it really went down, the people who were harmed the most and had a little bit of political will were able to get reparations accomplished for them. Other groups are still trying to fight the fight. I believe, is it like the Namibians?
Man muss auch sehen, dass man auch diese Menschen zum Beispiel,
Some of them would chop off the prisoners' heads
die Häftlinge die Köpfe abgeschnitten haben und die
and then throw the rest of their bodies in the water to feed the sharks.
Haifische gefuttert haben und so weiter, ja. Und das ist,
When I think about this history, it makes me sad
Geschichte fantasiere,
and bitter.
werde ich eigentlich traurig und sauer.
Israel Konarczyka is the only Herero activist in Germany. 100 years since the end of German colonialism, the 71-year-old Namibian is calling for the German government to take responsibility.
We're just demanding three things: an apology, recognition of genocide, and reparations. If you break something, you have to fix it.
Everybody has to fight their own fight. I don't understand. Everybody understands this except for when it comes to us. The Japanese didn't sit here and fight for reparations for all Asian people. They didn't even fight for reparations for Japanese people who weren't in the camp. I mean, so it's just goofy.
And didn't it only go to Japanese Americans on top of that?
Yes, it did. Yes,
yeah.
it did.
So,
there was
so they
like
even
Japanese.
split them up. They even split them up by if we're citizens. So
yeah. I think that also people need to look at the Native American situation because each tribe had cut their own deals with the American government. It wasn't some bullshit that we're all Native, so we all experienced the same thing. And, that was not the deal. So everybody had to figure out their own thing. And that's what's going to have to happen with, Black people who have been here for decades upon decades upon decades. Like, all of us did not have the same experience. So, for our ethnic group, we're going to have one deal. For Haitian Americans that might have been around, they're going to have another deal. Y'all get it. Y'all get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I totally agree.
All right, y'all ready for number 9?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'll reread that last sentence. It also rests on the tenuous definition of descendant and the actual definition of African American, which doesn't actually exist because race is just something white people made up. And number 9 is and white math. This entire concept of tying reparations to ancestry is based on a white supremacist construct used to demonize welfare queens, social programs, and the MAGA form of racism known as economic anxiety. According to the zero-sum philosophy, if everyone gets a piece of the American pie, there will be less for everyone. Unfortunately, that's not how math.
Stop. Run it back down too so I can reread it. I know you're going as we. Okay. So the entire concept of reparations based on ancestry is a white supremacist construct. So paying the people that you actually harmed is white supremacist versus just giving money to all people of color. And again, don't play these stupid games about if we're Black people who feel this way, we're acting like white supremacists who feel like if we get something, we're taking away from somebody else. Listen, reparations is a debt that is owed. Now, if y'all want to get this MMT thing popping and open up the coffers and everybody get money, like, Oprah, you get a car, you get some free education, you get your student loans paid, you get this, you get that. That's fine by me, but that's not coming out my reparations. Reparations is a debt that is owed. So for you to be like, we should just give it to everybody who's Black. So that means if you got here 5 minutes ago, you get a check. So are we going to be like New York? All you got to do is be in America 30 days and be Black and you get reparations? I don't think so.
Yeah, like this whole, the entire concept of tying reparations to ancestry is based on a white supremacist construct. Again, kind of, but not really. Because like the entire concept of inheritance is based on that same exact white supremacist concept. And I don't hear anybody saying, no, you don't deserve any inheritance. The whole idea of reparations is tied to this debt that we've inherited.
Yes.
Reparations was stolen from us. We already had it. The United States government stole reparations from Black Americans. There's not another Black group of people that can come in here and say that.
Exactly, because no Africans, Ghanaians, whatever were promised 40 acres and a mule. That was to the formerly enslaved freedmen. Y'all aren't freedmen because y'all wasn't slaves here.
Yeah, but this is exactly how math works. If they cut a deal for 20 trillion, 40 trillion, and they split that up between Black Americans who descend from American chattel slavery, it's going to come out to a certain number versus if you give it to all Black people, the number that breaks down for everybody is going to be smaller because there's going to be more people getting a piece of that pie. It's not like they're saying, like, they're not going to write us a blank check for reparations. They're going to have a limit on it. So yeah, that's exactly how the fuck it works. Now, if we're just talking about what the American government can do as far as like creating money, that's a different conversation. But when it comes to like government programs, they don't just write blank checks. Like, it's like they allocate a certain amount and then we're going to be getting a piece of that amount. So I don't know what the fuck these people are talking about.
I just wanted to say that reparations is not your piece of the American pie.
Facts.
You are not welcome. This is Negro pie over here.
Yes, that's a good one.
Them some Negro pie.
It's a Negro American pie. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because we made the pie anyway. We put the ingredients in the pie and everything. We're the bakers. That's how I feel about that.
So I want to read this next little spot and then I'll let you take it back over, Joey, because I see something that Steve Grumbine will be pulling out his hair. And when I get to it, I'm going to go in. So when wealth is distributed evenly, it generates more wealth and less poverty. This economic concept has been so widely accepted that we don't argue about it anymore. We are willing to use taxpayer money to subsidize white farmers, billionaires, and wealthy corporations. Wrong answer. Your taxpayer money doesn't fund or pay for any of that shit. The government prints its own currency. They can but they can issue as much of that currency as they want. All they have to do is adjust for inflation and make sure that there are actual real tangible resources that they are using. This can all be done through MMT, but for him to be like, we're using taxpayer money, that means you don't even understand how money really works in the government. So like, you shouldn't even be talking about reparations because you don't understand basic economics.
Yeah, his ideas are basically to set up a reparations program that would not be able to work. If we're going to tie it to taxpayer dollars, there's no way it's going to actually be done.
Yeah, because there's not enough taxpayer money. So by reasoning, that money will have a positive economic impact. We provide Social Security, small business loan, and stimulus checks for the same reason. Because it stimulates the economy. Apparently, Black people are the only segment of our society of which stimulus does not work because, we'll use it to buy Cadillac steaks and snow crabs. But the thing about it is, stop saying it's taxpayer money because it's not. Like, I don't have an argument. Your argument is that we should give checks to all Black people because we can afford to. Well, no, not for reparations. Y'all need to start fighting for them to do stuff for Americans and stop trying to fix America off our reparations. That's not what it's for.
Exactly. I was about to say that. I didn't realize our reparations is supposed to be some economic stimulus for, I guess, Black people in general. Like, it's supposed to be a repair for certain harms. So again, this is not about creating less poverty for Black people in America. This is not about some type of economic stimulus for all of America. This is about paying the debt to a certain group of people who have been harmed over and over again, and the can is just continuously kicked down the road as far as trying to resolve our issue.
And my thing is, so what if we buy Cadillacs and snow crabs? Mind your business. This is my money. Like,
white people buy trips to Europe.
Yes,
and
they buy yachts that they don't need.
They they buy expensive clothes for their dogs. They do all kinds of stuff. Like, leave me alone. Don't worry about how I spend my money. Stop pocket watching.
Yeah,
I don't know. So I watched that Pam and Tommy Lee movie, or the show that they did on Hulu. Like, Tommy put like multi-million dollars into like having like a freak room in his house. You know what I mean? Like, miss me on what we spend our money on.
And there's a whole show on Netflix that's #1 in America called Selling Sunset, when white people buy multiple homes in California. Meanwhile, the homelessness rate in California is like out the wazoo, and yet these people out here, being white women and white men, spending millions of dollars on homes that they don't need. Like, come on. Continue.
I can't pay my doctor bill, but Whitey's on the moon.
Right. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. This whole snow crabs, Cadillac stuff. Like, there's no air in space, and yet we've spent billions on space travel.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, like, our priorities are all kinds of messed up, and Black people don't have any unique problems that a couple million won't solve.
Right.
I just hate that shit because Dr. Darity has shown us that there's no evidence that we're just blowing our money like this. It's just some shit that white supremacists have come up in their mind, that we're just dumb motherfuckers that don't know how to handle money, and that's why we're in our economic situation. So people keep repeating this bullshit to us when there is no proof of this. Like, we actually manage our money better than white people if you look at the studies on this shit. So it's just infuriating to me.
Very much so. All right. You can go back to reading. I just, go ahead.
I got you. So giving reparations to more people who are affected by racial inequality is the surest way to repair the wealth gap.
Stop.
It's right
stop,
there in
stop,
the word.
Stop. So you basically mean now we should start. So this means we should start talking about the Latinos, and we need to start talking about the Vietnamese and the Cambodians and all the other poor people of color. Because this is what he's talking about. He's opening the door. This is affirmative action. Affirmative action was for us, and then you kick open the door, and before you know it, it's for white people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was
and
about
gay
to
white
say.
men.
I was about to say, this is like one step away from we should pay reparations to poor white people, because all he needs to do is take racial out of that sentence, and it becomes the same leftist nonsense we're hearing as far as reparations needs to be for everybody.
He's saying it without saying it.
He's opening up the door for sure. About the surest way to repair the wealth gap is giving reparations to more people. First of all, reparations can't go to more people. Reparations can only go to the people that were denied our reparations back in the 1800s. Yeah. So giving them to more people is only disrespecting us.
Yes.
How about we give you more attention?
Michael Harriot should give us all a piece of his paycheck every month, because he's rooting for everybody who's Black.
I have a question. Who's paying them anyway? Is there somebody important who owns
Byron Allen? Byron Allen, you sponsored this shit, you motherfucker.
Yeah, I've been trying to hold you down, Byron. I thought you were, changing your ways, and you became more pro-Black as you due to the experiences you faced.
He tried to use us. He used us. He used Black folks.
He did, and we kind of used him back because we saw that his shit was some high profile situation dealing with race. But ultimately, like, this is betrayal right here. I don't like, after this motherfucking shit dropped, even if you didn't know personally, Byron Allen, that this shit was going down, because I doubt that you're like involved in every decision that's made with your businesses. But
you could have pulled this bullshit.
Yeah, as soon as this shit came out, you should have made a phone call and told this motherfucker to pull this article, because this is some bullshit right here.
I've never seen any Jewish outlet argue about why Jewish people don't deserve reparations. Mr. Allen, you dropped the ball on this one. It's your responsibility to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen, and it certainly doesn't come out of your outlets. This is on you. And we've been waiting and watching to see what you were going to do with all those billions you got, Mr. Weather Channel.
And he did nothing. Nothing for us anyways.
I agreed.
Nothing. You better get your people together.
I agree.
Because your slip is hanging a whole lot. You do not want Black people to start looking into you, sir.
Oh, it will get ugly.
We all want to support you. We see you winning. You in that early Obama era right now.
Nah, I think we should just accept that Byron Allen is our class enemy, and we should go from there.
Works for me. I never trusted him. You got that much money into this kind of system, it's because you a little bit too affable. So yeah, you got a whole lot to prove, Mr. Byron Allen. I'm gonna need you to come out and make a statement, because like I said, if Black people start to get curious about like what's going on in your life and where you've been after you came out super pro-Black for a couple months, it's gonna get real ugly for you. Ain't nobody gonna be watching the Weather Channel no more. But where did I leave off at?
More people.
More people getting their share of pie doesn't necessarily mean smaller slices for everyone. This is only true if we accept that there is only one pie that's already been prepared. Interesting. Otherwise, you'd probably need some intelligent people to figure out how many people need pie and request ingredients to give everyone an adequate slice.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, no.
I agree. But if only there was some kind of task force that could work this out. Not sure how the this pie analogy here is supposed to work. Like, if you start off with whole pie and start giving out slices, that necessarily means smaller slices for everyone.
No, he's saying that we should request enough pie to feed everybody, even people who shouldn't be getting our pie. People that don't deserve our American Negro pie.
He's saying something much more interesting. He's saying this is only true if we accept that there's only one pie. But if there's more than one pie, why do all these people want our pie?
Exactly. That's why it doesn't make sense what he just said, though. Like,
and ain't nobody trying to give us a slice of their pie. I don't see that shit happening. Exactly. When that shit starts happening, then maybe you can start talking this type of shit. But everybody eats their pie. They don't even allow us to get crumbs. They eat the shit in front of us, watching us starve.
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, as soon as we start talking about, hey, a pie needs to be baked for us, then everybody wants to fucking have their hand out.
Yeah, that's so frustrating. What it's giving to me is that America deliberately picks immigrants to come here to eat in front of us. She is very abusive to us. Like, she's not giving us what she owes us. She's not feeding us, and yet she let other people in, give them a specific pie, let them eat in front of us, and then make us fight them to get our pie for us. Like, why are you making me fight folk that just got here? You already fed them. No. I can't. Anyway, continue on.
Number 8, it excludes the actual descendants of the enslaved. It is said that there were Africans who couldn't nobody own, including those who revolted aboard slave ships and those who escaped immediately after landing and lived in maroon communities. Archaeologists believe thousands of unknown Africans resided in North Carolina's Great Dismal Swamp. Their descendants alone may number in the hundreds of thousands by now. How about the Haitians and free people of color who lived in Louisiana before America purchased it from France?
Can you
They are
stop with this, please? Can you stop 1 second? Speaking as someone who has Haitian ancestry, I hate when people bring this up. This is not what this is. This is not what this is. This is not what this is. I hate this whole argument that he's pulling right now. I don't like it. And I speak as someone who has Haitian ancestry. So I just want to put that out there. This is
because they married in. This is the thing.
Right.
Everybody keeps pretending like people don't marry in. If you have been in this country for hundreds of years and you have never married a Black American who is a descendant of slaves, when we were the majority of the people here that were Black, you did that by a choice. So you don't get to reap the benefits now.
Yeah.
You saw yourself as something different, so you're something different, in my opinion. But also, all of this is stupid because, again, California is saying if you were here before the 1900s, you know, you would be in. Like, that's the rule they came up with. So, and he's basing this on the California decision. So it's almost like none of these motherfuckers actually like listen to the California task force or any of the shit that went down. They just kind of heard like vaguely what happened. And then they just wanted to like, you know, do like verbal diarrhea somewhere and like act like there's some type of authority and then they know what the fuck they're talking about when clearly they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah. It's clear because he's all over the place and he's supposed to be talking about California. Why are you talking about the Carolinas? Why are you talking about, like, bruh? Anyway.
Yeah, he's shoehorning anybody he can into this. But so how about the Haitians and free people of color who lived in Louisiana before America purchased it from France? They are Americans. They are descendants of slaves, but they were not Americans when they were enslaved, nor were they enslaved by American citizens. The same holds true for Black people who were emancipated. Sorry?
I just said all of that is dumb. All of
Yeah,
that is dumb.
it
Everything he
is.
just said is dumb. Because you should have married in. And even if you did it, if you were free, if you were here, you're here. You're on the 1865 census, or 1876 census. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And the same holds true for Black people who were emancipated before 1776. Technically, they were British citizens before America existed. How about the millions of Black immigrants from the Caribbean who came to America as freedmen, but were enslaved by Americans who owned plantations in Jamaica, Barbados, the Bahamas, etc.? While this might sound like an inconsequential fact, it is how South Carolina actually became a colony. Oh, by the way, it's also why Charleston, South Carolina had the highest per capita income in 13 colonies before the American Revolution, which is why it was the city known as the slave capital of America.
I don't know why we're talking about colonies, because that is under the jurisdiction of the British, which is a separate claim that we will probably make at some other time. Right now, if we're talking about America, we need to be talking about who was here from 1776 to at least 1865. But in California, they're saying we're going all the way up to the 1900s. So if you were here and, you know, you meet the requirements as far as like for California residents or for their particular reparations program, you're included. All of this, none of this is actually arguing against what they're doing. It's just you're trying to make it seem like they're doing something that they're not.
Yep. And how about
the gag is? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say,
go ahead. Sorry, Joe.
How about the millions of Black immigrants from the Caribbean who came to America as freedmen, but they were enslaved by Americans who owned plantations in Jamaica, Barbados, and the Bahamas? CARICOM. That's why.
Yes, I was just about to say that. Yes, he could have mentioned CARICOM right there. Anyway,
like that's who's gonna handle that. And again, they're not concerned with Black Americans and their reparations claim.
as
He's
they should
arguing
not
on
be.
behalf. He's arguing on behalf of I don't even know who, because obviously they have their own reparations claim. White people aren't making this argument. He just pulled this out of his ass.
Mm-hmm. And he needs to go right in the toilet.
That's the thing I noticed, because the other argument these same type of people make is, well, why are you talking about immigrants? Immigrants didn't ask for reparations. Then why the fuck do you motherfuckers keep trying to add immigrants into the conversation?
Exactly.
This is coming from somewhere, and it seems to be coming from Black Americans who, I guess, I don't know, they think that making this argument makes them more pro-Black or whatever the case may be, but it's just a nonsensical argument.
I think, speaking as someone who has been in academia for a brief minute, what Black people who are in academia who do stuff like this, they don't want to be seen as the angry Black person. They don't want an Asian person, calling them anti-Asian. They don't want a Latino person calling them xenophobic. And they don't want a Black immigrant calling them anti-Black immigrant. So they say stuff like this so that appease other folk. It's ridiculous. It's like, why are you not standing your ground? Everybody else does it.
And just offer them something personal that you own. Like, don't offer them our reparation. Like, if you want to offer people like a place to stay in your home, that's perfectly fine with me. I'm nothing against nobody. This ain't about that. This is about not using my family's trauma as an opportunity for people who didn't go through it.
Exactly, yeah. It's called respect.
All right. So number 7 is it asks the victims of a criminal enterprise to solve a crime. Imagine if someone managed to escape from a ring of kidnappers. The kidnappers, knowing they were guilty, began to free their victims. Half the people are free when the cops burst in, and half are still in chains. How would they determine who was a kidnapped victim and who was a kidnapper? I have no idea. I mean, you could just check to see what they were doing prior to the kidnapping, but all I know is that the worst way to solve the crime would be to ask the people who weren't in chains to solve the crime. Yet, that's what the California Task Force proposes. And when it comes to reparations, this is not just a hypothetical scenario. Although California was supposed to be a free state, as many as 1,500 Black people were illegally transported to California between 1849 and 1861. I suspect it will be hard for Native Californians who actually descend from the enslaved people to find their documentation of their ancestors' theft. I don't want to sound like a bigot, but in my experience, thieves are usually terrible at record keeping.
Oh my God. So first, the analogy doesn't make any fucking sense. Essentially, when we talk about kidnappers, we would be talking about like the American government in as being the responsible party in all of this. And part of the reason why the reparations needs to be paid is because they have not did the right thing for us in regards to justice is concerned. So I don't know, like trying to say that using the American government would be the same as turning to our kidnappers or whatever the case may be he's trying to argue, like it's ridiculous because there is no other entity we can turn to actually resolve this issue. We have to go to the American government. It is the only entity that could solve this. But this whole, I suspect that they don't have the documentation. Well, what are you basing that on? Like, this is the problem with a lot of these people. They're just assuming things and they're not actually like backing it up with anything like of substance. We watched the task force have a meeting where they brought in 6 genealogists. 5 of the 6 people basically said they would be able to trace lineage and it would not be a problem. So I don't know what people are talking about. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
And this whole notion that these are terrible at record keeping. Nah, these plantation owners, they kept the records so that they can recoup after the war. They kept their records secured where they were. And being someone who has looked up some of the records in the state of Connecticut, like these people wrote down their slaves and how many slaves they owned so they could get insurance from Connecticut and Massachusetts and New York. So this man with this whole premise, he sounds idiotic. I've seen the records. They keep them. Like, that's a lie. Move on.
Yeah, I'll just bring up Irene Triplett. She was the last surviving person to receive Civil War benefits, and she passed away in 2020. This idea that we can't go back that far is complete nonsense. We've been paying people since the end of the Civil War. Actually, before then, but let's keep it there. Like, we keep incredible records for what was going on at the time. Because, you know, the whole Civil War, we destroyed the country, united the country. It was a whole lot of weirdness going on.
Yeah.
And we kept immaculate records. We know who we are. We know who the people who were targeted.
And to extend upon that before you read number 6, like looking in New England, like they have been able to track Black people in New England since the 1600s. Like, we are there. We exist here. It's not hard to find us. This is an easy job for America to do because we're here. We didn't go nowhere. So yeah.
All right, number 6. Reparations for African Americans should not be limited to slavery. The dollar value on the free labor stolen between 1776 and 1865 is just a fraction of what was stolen from Africans in America. In 1865, America was 89 years old, and there were 4 million Black people enslaved in the US. 84 years after emancipation, 15 million Black people were subject to Jim Crow, redlining, unequal wages, and the theft of their tax dollars. As I wrote in 2020, the intergenerational transfer of Black wealth that came after slavery may be more than what was taken during slavery. Think about the tax dollars collected that were used to build whites-only schools, public accommodations, and institutions of higher learning to which Black people had no access. How about the devaluing of real estate as a result of redlining, or the GI Bill that wasn't available to Black veterans, or banks that legally excluded Black customers but were federally insured with Black tax dollars? The New Deal, the largest social program in American history, built the middle class for white America with Black tax dollars. How about the wage inequality, credit disparities, and employment opportunities that still persist? All of this didn't just suddenly end in 1865. All Black people are inheritors of the legacy of slavery.
Okay. So, wow. Okay. So aren't these things that are included? This is based on the California one, right? So is California doing the vestiges of slavery? Buddy,
yeah, but they're not doing that. They're not using that argument that these things are the vestiges of slavery. They're kind of looking at all these things as their own individual harms done to a certain group. So,
okay, so they're looking at each one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is he talking about then? I'm just making sure, because I just didn't want to speak out of turn, because I have been following the task force, but my brain works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. I've had a lot going on. But I'm just, so what is he saying? Like, we all understand that it's more than just slavery. Who said that we're fighting for just slavery reparations?
This is the bullshit he was doing during the Marcel argument, where he kept acting like as if Marcel was arguing that we should only do something about slavery, when Marcel kept saying over and over again, like, we're talking about all the things that happened to this particular group of people. So it's like a sleight of hand that these people do, where, like, if we say we're doing it lineage based off people who could trace their lineage back to an ancestor who was enslaved in America, then we're only talking about slavery. We can't be talking about anything else. So it's just bullshit.
I know I like to play people's arguments against themselves. So I want to read this sentence again. How about the wage inequality, credit disparities, and employment opportunities that still persist? All of this didn't just suddenly end in 1865. If that's the case, then doesn't that mean all of the people who willingly came here after 1865 are just rolling around in the blood money? Just saying, volunteers are not victims.
What? Mind blown.
You don't get to sign up for Jim Crow and then say Jim Crow is a problem.
Hey, which one of us moving to Ukraine?
No, that's not, I don't know nothing. I didn't hear nothing.
It's crazy because, like, the thing is, I have a whole bunch of complaints about the Ukraine, but I'm making them from the United States of America. I'm not moving over to the Ukraine looking for my better life and then complaining about Ukraine. I didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on me.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if all Black people are the inheritors of the legacy of slavery, how did that happen? Because I know how we inherited the legacy of slavery. It was forced onto us. How did anybody else inherit that?
Well, to put it to the motion or the notion of all Black people, can you go back to that sentence? Because I want to read that sentence again. Okay, so all Black people are inheritors of the legacy of slavery. I know that that's a lie, because what about the Africans that sold us into slavery? They are not inherited. They don't deserve an inheritance for the institution of slavery. They got their money when they sold us.
That's the thing people don't like to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about that they sold us. We got sold by those folks. Like, y'all didn't run up in the camps and get us. They took us out and sent us with you.
Right. Yeah. We were sold into slavery. My Mississippi grandmother, my father's mother, reminds me of that all the time. She tells me all the time, don't forget we were sold. So, and she's in her mid-80s. So you want me to tell my grandmother she lying? Nah.
No, but all Black people are inheritors of the legacy of slavery. Just like all Americans are inheritors of the legacy of terrorism via 2001. So I don't know why Pete Davidson's family got a check and mine didn't. I mean, it happened to all of us, right? I mean, I understand I didn't lose any family in the towers or any of the attacks, but I was in America at the time. So don't that mean I get a check too? Shouldn't I be getting free healthcare?
Yeah, shouldn't we all be? Like, come on. Yeah.
But number 5 is white supremacy does not differentiate between kinds of Black people. Sounds kind of racist. To be fair, the data shows that non-white immigrants fare better than descendants of enslaved people. Black immigrants tend to be more educated and more financially secure than US-born Black Americans. Yet, while advocates of lineage-based reparations use this to justify their position, the data proves them wrong. There's very little data on African-American descendants of enslaved people, but when one compares Black immigrants to white immigrants, American-born whites, or any other racial or ethnic groups, the same racial disparities appear. And while the children of Black immigrants are more likely to earn a college degree, get a job, and escape the confines of the criminal justice system, according to census data, the economic disparities between Black immigrants and US-born whites increase with each generation. By the third generation, the effects of slavery and white supremacy on Black immigrants and US-born Blacks are virtually the same. No, they're not.
Well, I speak as someone who has a Haitian grandmother. By the time it got to me, we were still living in abject poverty, but my mother was raised with an educated mom and my mom was able to graduate from high school. I was too, but like I lived in abject poverty because of my father's people being Mississippi people. And I'm third generation of Haitians. So it does eventually get you if you do not go back and forth between the island or the country that you came from and America. So I know Haitian people I went to college with who traveled back and forth between Haiti and the States, and they didn't succumb to poverty. But because my grandmother was one of those very small percentage of Black immigrants that got to America before 1965, you know, she came in during the tail end of the Jim Crow era. So it's rare, but it does happen. If you stay here long enough and you stay around Black Americans, you will be in poverty. So yeah.
It's like the effects of slavery. Like
but
my great grandfather was a slave, and like that led to us being poor. But like we grew up with like some poor whites, and that wasn't the effects of slavery. That was just America. Exactly. That was just American capitalism.
Yeah. And with my immigrant side, with my Haitian side, that's because of America's capitalism. Yeah. And then the whole idea of flat Blackness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like I hate to like cut immigrants out of the conversation, because there is a conversation to be had about racism, about the racism that Black immigrants experience, but it's not the same racism that Black Americans experience. Yeah, it's not the same racism that other ethnicities or other races of immigrants experience. Like Black immigrants have a very unique experience with the immigration system, and that's the conversation that they need to be having. It's not that y'all need to be pointing your way into reparations.
That I agree. And I will say this as someone who again has a Haitian grandmother. The fact that I was able to go to an Ivy League school with my name, with my first name, it sounds very Latina. And when they see me, they're like, oh, she's Black, but she has a Latina name. Okay, I was able to get into spaces that if my name was an average Black American descendant of slavery name, I would not have been able to get into. So I have had a small sense of privilege by virtue of me being half Haitian. But, you know, I scare white people because I tell them, hey, I have Mississippi blood. So I'm not that Haitian descendant that's going to be like, oh, I have immigrant experience, even though I don't. I was born here. But I've been able to get into spaces by virtue of my first name. I can't deny that. So that is a bit of a privilege that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So, and I need for Black immigrants and people who descend from Black immigrants to speak to that privilege and have that conversation. They don't want to have the conversation, though they need to. So, anywho.
Yeah, I don't know, this thing of like, because Black immigrants are having different outcomes than white immigrants, that automatically means they're like grouped into the same struggle as us. I'm sorry, I don't buy that shit. Now, if you like marry into our families and, you know, you go through all of this shit and your offspring have like a Black American experience, that's kind of how that goes. But just to say, because you're not having the same outcomes as white immigrants, that's a whole other fight. Like, to me, that's between immigrants. That has nothing to do with, you know, Black people who have been here for centuries upon centuries, and they were fighting with the white people who aren't considered immigrants at this point. So I don't know, like this shit is just like a weird argument to me. Clearly there is a difference between our experiences, and we see it when we look at the data. You know, we see it directly that, you know, they're faring differently in this system than we are. So I don't know, like, regardless, none of this adds to them having an experience where they could trace their lineage back to the harms of slavery, peonage, you know, convict leasing, all of that stuff that happened, you know, in the 1800s and has only combined with things that have happened in recent generations to compound to this lineage wealth gap that we're experiencing. So it's bullshit to me.
Also, just real quick on the criminal justice system point, like, nobody built prisons for immigrants. That didn't happen. Like, it's not for African immigrants. They didn't like, oh, well, we have an influx of African immigrants, time to build more prisons. No, they only do that for Negroes.
Yeah.
If they would rather keep y'all out of the country than lock y'all up.
Yep, that's true. That's why it's so hard for Black immigrants to come here. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, here, give me a second. Let me switch rooms. No, what I was saying is, I know people hate to have this discussion, but Black Americans have a different experience than Black immigrants because we are not immigrants. It's just that simple. Just by virtue of us not being immigrants, we have a different experience because we don't get to come here and start over and start fresh and start new. Immigrants have their own fight, and when you start trying to just lump Black immigrants in with Black Americans, you're dismissing the issues that they do have, which a lot of these issues you're bringing up, like how it is harder for them to get in the country, and some of these other things you were saying. But that's not my issue.
Exactly. And being that I'm half, I feel like folk who are half of Black American descendant of chattel slavery and half Black immigrant should be anchoring themselves in their American side. Like, and acknowledge your immigrant side, but anchor yourself in your American side. Like, it's not that hard. People are afraid of getting pushback. They don't want to get pushback. They don't want to have to fight. They don't want to have to do that work. Like, do the work. Anchor yourself. If you were born in America, I was born in America, and you had Alabama people, Mississippi people, anchor yourself there and fight the good fight there, and also fight the good fight with your other side. Like, it's a tough thing to do, but you have to do it. It's a good fight. It's healthy for you, I feel.
All right, so unlike every other demographic, having educated parents, a high income, or a past that does not include slavery does not immunize Black immigrants from the effects of white supremacy. Sounds like he changed his argument here, because he went from saying, well, Black immigrants are impacted by the legacy of slavery to saying having a past that does not include slavery doesn't immunize Black immigrants from the effects of white supremacy.
Yep. Switcheroo.
It just sounds like a good way to get our whole claim thrown out.
Yeah.
What it sounds like what y'all want to do is a poverty program, and reparations for Black Americans who descend from chattel slavery is not a poverty program.
No, it's not.
If you want one of those, you need to get with the American government and make them do what they're supposed to do for their citizens.
Yeah.
Because as you see, they got money for everything but.
Oh, this one's gonna be a doozy. Black immigrants receiving reparations is economically better for Black communities. Asian, Hispanic, and white immigrants are more likely to live around people of similar income, while Black immigrants live around other Black people. According to the National Academy of Sciences, Black immigrants and their children are integrating with non-Hispanic whites at the slowest rate, despite Black immigrants' relatively high educational attainment and employment rates. In fact, Black people who migrate from other countries are more likely to live in Black communities than Black people who are born in America. Non-native Black entrepreneurs are more likely to employ African Americans, and first-generation immigrants are more likely to attend a historically Black college than a first-generation Black college student. Anything?
Well, it sounds like, and I hate to be like this, but it sounds like they are replacing us in our communities.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if that's the case, they might be making it economically better, but they're making it economically better for themselves.
Yep. It says non-native Black entrepreneurs are more likely to employ African Americans. More likely than whom?
What did you say, Josiah?
More likely than who?
Facts.
More likely to employ African Americans than who? White people? Because it certainly can't be they're more likely to hire African Americans over African Americans. Like, I've been ghetto my whole life, and that's just demonstrably false.
Yeah, no. I live in New England. I live in the Northeast. I live in an area that's predominantly Jamaican. We have a large Jamaican population, and they're the ones that own like the Black businesses where I live. They hire Jamaicans. They don't hire Black Americans. And if you're Haitian, you're not being hired because it's like, why are you here? They hire Jamaicans. They're very specific on who they hire. Africans hire Africans. And if you're Nigerian, you're getting hired. But if you're a regular degular Black American, you're not being hired by, excuse me, Africans, especially those that just got here. You're not being hired by them. They hire their own. They hire their own tribal and country.
And this idea that them going to a historically Black college is somehow economically better for a Black community.
I don't understand that either.
How?
Especially when they're not doing anything for our community except fucking up our politics.
Right. And they're just existing in our spaces that we built for ourselves. So, and they are the same people who say that Black people are not educated, that Black Americans don't care about education. Yet you're going to my institution that is more accredited than yours in your country. And they have the gall to then become doctors or whatnot and then not hire us after attending our schools. Yeah.
If they were hiring us, like, they don't have enough businesses to like economically improve the Black community.
No, they don't. They don't. They don't have enough money either.
Well, let's keep it pushing. Number 3, it absolved racists by literally fitting the definition of racist. Oh, this is some Tucker Carlson shit right here.
Yes, it is.
One of the justifications for this decision is that lineage-based reparations circumvent the California law that forbids preferential treatment to individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin. The committee's race-neutral solution thereby appeases the only demographic that supported this original I don't see color resolution: white people. Many of those same white people believe they didn't benefit from slavery if they didn't own slaves. And now they would be able to claim that they fixed racism by denying reparations to Black people.
Wait, what?
Many of those same white people believe they didn't benefit from slavery if they didn't own slaves, and now they would be able to claim that they fixed racism by denying reparations to Black people.
Not all Black people.
That's the Tucker Carlson.
That is a hot mess. Oh my goodness. Did you reread this before you submitted it?
Obviously, he didn't.
Well, first of all, reparations is not to fix racism. And even if we were looking at it as the fix, giving it to the people who were actually like descendants of the enslaved would not be denying reparations to like those particular people. Like he jumps from like those specific people to like just this broad description of Black people. And when it's supposed to be like remedying the actual harms that were done to the specific group, like it's such a weird sleight of hand that like he's doing. He has to know what he's doing. Like this is not by accident. This is not like he wasn't thinking this through. It's like he purposely is doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And all right, so I'm trying to understand, just for this overall argument, he might get into it, which, you know, I know he doesn't, but like, so we should ignore the laws, the standing laws that are in the state or in, you know, the federal government in regards to how we can't create laws based on race, you know, to benefit a particular set of people, even if that's for people who were, you know, historically disadvantaged because of race-based policy. If that's the standard, And how exactly do we get around that without, like, I get the idea of, okay, we shouldn't just buy into white people's arguments, but that is the law. How the fuck do we get around that? If you're saying that we shouldn't buy into that idea, you need to be providing an alternative that would actually get around the law. Otherwise, you're just setting us up to fail.
And I think that's what they want. They, out of some stupid principle, they want us to not get reparations. So because everybody couldn't get it, and it doesn't work like that. Like that's why when was it Takai? Is that what his name was? When he was talking about how they ended up having to leave certain people out and like how he regrets it. That's why he voted against us. And it's like, dude, that's your own problem. But you did what you had to do because you knew that was the only way you're going to get what you needed to get. And again, I'm going to say what I say all the time. If you are a Black person, an African person here who's a first gen, and you ain't got no Black American friends, that's on you. You ain't reparations, that's on you. But I know if I get reparations, especially if we got this 6.4 quadrillion, I know my Ghanaian American first generation homegirl gonna be straight. So it sounds like some of y'all, instead of fighting against this, need to go get some Black American friends. That's it.
It says many of those same white people believe they didn't benefit from slavery if they didn't own slaves. Can we switch out white people with Americans? Because like the way I see it, all Americans benefited from slavery, even if they didn't own slaves. This whole country was built on that. And if you came here seeking a better life in our own version of Nazi Germany, you were in on it. You benefited from it.
Ooh, and can I jump on what Mud was saying when he was talking about how white people voted against in California Prop 209, which got rid of race? Baby, Latinos voted in a high numbers to get rid of that stuff too. It wasn't just the whites; the Latinos voted for it too. Like
Latinos are the new white, though. They're becoming white just like Asians are. So there's that.
But isn't it ironic?
The white ones were always white.
Yeah, that's true. Go ahead. Come on.
I got you. So isn't it ironic that the state of California is proposing to fix the impact of a legalized constitutional race-based institution that contributed to this systemic oppression of Black people to the social, economic, and political advantage of whites by adhering to a legalized constitutional race-based law that contributed to the systemic oppression of Black people to the social, economic, and political advantages of white. Maybe ironic is the wrong word. There's got to be another one. Number 2, there are better ways, such as generation-based reparations. It's hard to argue against the idea that the negative effects of slavery have compounded interest with each successive generation. Perhaps the reparations should be paid according to how many generations a Black family has lived in America.
Okay, so he would be pissed off with that one. My friend's mom has no bones buried here. My first generation friend has no bones buried here. Should you get a check if you have no bones buried here? As in not even a single family member buried here.
No.
They got here in 88, 89. So generation based, does she get nothing? They should get nothing.
Right.
So what generation are we starting with paying?
Well, this is the other issue that I noticed with this dude, especially in the debate he had with Marcel. He does not want to name a definitive cutoff date as far as who would be excluded. Like when, like he'll say over and over again, of course I don't want Black people who just got here yesterday to get reparations, but he won't be like, okay, the cutoff date is 1980, 1960. Like he doesn't do that shit. So like this is the problem with all of these argumentations from these people. It's like they're not presenting a position that would actually lead to creating a successful framework for reparations.
Exactly.
It's just like they just have this idealized, we got to help everybody, So let's argue against anything that is specific. So yeah, I mean, this is a shitty idea. I don't know, like again.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say they get progressively worse.
I hate that look at this one lump sum and talk about if you have one parent who is white, do you get half a check? This just shows that you're not following what's going on and you don't know anything. Like, how dare you even ask that question? Like, that's crazy.
He doesn't know enough.
And it's like, if your great grandparents immigrated in 1890, are you less impacted by slavery? How did your grandparents get here in 1890 and not marry a single person who was formerly enslaved when we were the biggest Negro population, Black population, people of color population, non-white population?
But the answer
on the continent.
The answer is yes. They are less impacted because they weren't actually enslaved. Like, their parents weren't slaves. So yeah, they're less impacted by it.
But don't they live in all our neighborhoods and go to all our schools?
I don't give a fuck. There's white people that live in our neighborhoods and go to our schools.
They are not impacted by the institution of slavery. The negative, no, they're not.
No, they're interested. How about this is gonna be the episode for the whites, right? No, they're not impacted by the vestiges of slavery. They are impacted by the vestiges of capitalism.
That's right.
And in capitalism, there's got to be some losers. And Black immigrants, not all of them, but a lot of them are the losers in that side of the capitalism.
Yeah, and in that side of immigration. Yeah.
Versus other immigration. Exactly.
Yeah. And they don't want to do that work. And it's really sad to see. You can't call Black Americans lazy if you're not willing to do the work to address how America's immigration status is anti-Black towards you. You have to do that work. You can't call me lazy and not do that work. You can't call my people lazy who are Mississippi and not fix your schools in your country to make it accredited. Like, yeah, no, you can't. Anyhow.
One lump sum for everybody Black. If your great-grandparents immigrated to America in 1890, are you less impacted by the legacy of slavery? So somehow, from 1890 to 2022, you've lived in all the Black communities. You went to all the Black schools, and somehow you avoided all the Negroes.
Didn't marry a single Negro.
Years. You managed to keep your bloodline pure, and I respect you for it, and I want you to keep doing it. Stay the hell away from my people.
Facts.
If one
People
of your
don't even
parents
think
is
how
white,
crazy this sounds.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. If one of your parents is white, do you get half a check? Or does your white side of your family that benefited from white supremacy negate the impact on the Black half? Should Nicole Richie get more than Notorious B.I.G.? Yes.
Notorious B.I.G. Yes, because Notorious B.I.G. is Jamaican.
So he shouldn't get nothing. Sorry.
He's dead.
So yes, anyway. Nicole Richie. And isn't Nicole Richie adopted?
Yes, and I think it's.
Am I wrong?
I don't even like. I think people say she might be mixed, but I don't know. I haven't.
No, that's a whole white. I think that's a whole white woman. She's just adopted. Yeah, that's a whole white woman.
Like just adopted by Lionel Richie from white parents, but I don't think she's mixed at all. But
yeah, that's a white woman.
Neither is Biggie.
That's a white woman.
He whole Jamaican.
He a whole Jamaican. That's right. Jamaican American.
So if we are correct, then no on both ends.
Right. Well, on both ends.
Can we also, like, it's 2022 and you're referencing Biggie? Like, I hate to be that person, but this motherfucker died like fucking 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You don't have an update.
When I was a kid.
The update is Nipsey, by the way, for those of y'all who are looking to grift off of this.
But I mean, even then, that's another motherfucker that's going. Like, none of them are getting checks.
Oh my goodness. So number 3 is get reparations for people who were not enslaved. I ain't got nothing for these folks, honestly. Because slavery was constitutional, a legal argument for reparations would probably fail in an American court, unless, of course, we could convince Ta-Nehisi Coates to do the closing arguments. Corny. But the Supreme Court has ruled that school districts, cities, lending institutions, state legislatures, federal government, and local voting boards illegally discriminated against all Black Americans. Maybe every Black taxpayer from 1776 should just ask for a return on our investment with interest. We don't even have to call it reparations. Call it a tax refund. We still have our receipts.
Isn't that what they just did for people who weren't able to get married for a period of time, and now they're allowed to get married, so they're giving them back the back tax returns?
Yep.
So how about you pay me reparations, and then you can do all this other crap you're talking about too?
Yep, because that's not reparations. If you have to call it something else,
that's reparations. Yeah, that's not reparations.
Yeah, and this whole taxpayer thing, like, I don't know. We need to like shake our people of this shit, because we should not be talking like this if we're actually serious about reparations.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah, because it's not taxpayer money.
Yeah, I mean, the federal government is not financed through our taxes. Like, I mean, I don't know. We just probably got to do more episodes on MMT, because it seems like a bunch of motherfuckers just don't know. And
Steve would love that. Steve would love to come and hang out with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think y'all need to do more episodes on that. I agree.
Because, I mean, if we keep having to deal with people talking about taxpayer money, we're never going to get fucking reparations, because it's just no fucking way to do it.
It is. Facts, because it's limited. Every time you say it's our taxpayer money, that's limited. So whose taxes went up since the Ukrainian war started? Because we were sending all this money to NATO, right? Like, that money's coming out of somewhere, right? So when did the government start knocking on our doors and taking more taxes? I know there's inflation, but where have they marked up the taxes? Who can show me in their check the sending money to NATO tax?
I mean, if we're going to be real, unless you're talking about like, what's those things called? Like tax credits that unless we're talking about like Trump getting rid of the tax credits, they have not raised taxes on the federal level like decades. I mean, we've had wars, we've done stimuluses.
We've been at war since 2001.
Yeah, and they haven't raised taxes to pay for it. So yeah, we need to stop talking about taxpayer money and reparations. Putting those two things together in a conversation, it instantly kills the conversation.
Facts. We're about to go to the next stupid thing, next stupid idea.
Just pay everybody Black. Look.
Stupid.
I know what I said about California's law, but you and I both know that this thing is going to end up in court anyway.
So let's do it the way that the court's going to throw it out. So you Negroes will have to come back again and do it the right way. That's stupid.
And we're not even going to give the white people any work. We're not going to make it hard for them to like try to fuck us. We're just going to give them an easy layup. We just going to set it up.
Because we're just going to do it to everybody who's Black. So like you said, everybody who got a Black grandmother, a Black grandmother, Black great grandmother, but they white now, and they're going to be talking about how they, took a 23andMe like on South Park. I'm 4% Black. And they're going to be out here getting checks because we should just pay everybody that's Black, right? And being that Black isn't just melanin, because we got a bunch of Black people who got white skin that are our people.
Right.
That was an argument.
And they identify as Black on their paperwork, and they're real Black people. So how are you going to tell them apart from the fake from the fake blacks when we just start saying any black person.
That was an argument that Camilla kept bringing up. Like, you know, people keep questioning the lineage thing, but like, how do you determine who's black? Like, what are we going to do? We're going to have the government hire people to be the brown paper bag testers.
That's the
to see who's eligible.
It's stupid. It's stupid. It's stupid.
How will white people get all the money? Sorry, keep reading this shit. I'm reading ahead. Forgive me, y'all. Oh my God.
Let's see, a reparations test. No, I'm not talking about qualifying anyone who can recite at least one Frankie Beverly song or do the electric slide without looking at their feet. Michael Harriot, please stop doing this. Please, 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 please stop trying to like sneak in some artifact of black culture to prove that you're down.
It's so terrible.
Like, black people,
it's performative.
And we know it.
Yes,
you're butt dancing.
Literally.
But if the NFL can do race norming for CTE, why can't California do the same for reparations? Instead of using lineage as the sole metric, the state could use the same individual information to create an algorithm that determines how much wealth was stolen from each applicant.
Oh my fucking God.
So this is the gag, right? Let's just say that in a stupid dumbass world, we did it this way, right? How mad will these Africans be when they get a check for $20 when they got here in 1989? Because that's really what you owed. Maybe some stamps.
Not stamps.
I'm just saying.
I mean, but this is also some bullshit. Like you setting up, basically you're going to be financing the whole fucking bureaucracy just to come up with a way to like determine how much
people, to really include like 6 to 10 million people. It get out of here.
Yeah, and you think like that means they're going to, instead of like them coming up with like a simple determination that like is not going to even take much other than them cutting checks after they figure out who's who. They're going to have to figure out everybody's goddamn individual story for 43
million applications.
Like, did
we forget what happened when everybody had to file unemployment and how these systems couldn't get it together? But they're gonna process everybody's claims, especially because if you want to get into direct harms, I can go into direct harms. Like I can show where my family was redlined on multiple houses. But
Sam,
who got time for that?
But Sam, you're not going to even be alive by the time they get to processing your application.
I'm telling you, the way bodies keep dropping in my family, I swear to God.
I'm just saying, like, if they got to do this for, like, they got to do a calculation for 40 million people. Who, like, how far back are you in the back of the line when you're that 40th million person? Like,
yeah, for real.
Like how? Like you got to wait 100 years before you like they figure out your shit.
This is terrible. I'm glad Marcel ate him up.
Me too. He beat him up, girl.
But see, this is like he's considered, I guess, a thought leader.
I was over him after the Pete Buttigieg thing because he had so much to say, but then when he got in, sorry, I'm gonna stop harping on it, but you may have to put that. But I just can't take it. Like I said, no, he's not a thought leader.
I want to know what happened with the Pete Buttigieg. I didn't see that.
Oh, well, he had wrote an article like, isn't it like Pete Buttigieg like full of shit or something like that? I forgot what it was. It was all about how like Pete Buttigieg is racist because Pete Buttigieg like literally did systemic racism in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay.
Like he literally paid a company that was mainly employing Black and brown people to leave the city, like all kinds of stuff. Like it was crazy. People got to go back and watch Jordan Sherman's reporting on this because I don't remember all of it, but there was just a lot going on. So this is during that time when he was running for election. So he, did that whole thing, and then he, and then when he got to sit down with Pete Buttigieg, instead of holding him to account for his record, he started soft shoeing and tiptoeing.
So I want to thank you for taking this time out to talk face to face. And I want to ask you the last question, which is the most important question in our community is, you here in Montgomery, salt or sugar on grits?
Ooh, I didn't know sugar was an option.
Right, yes.
Okay, good.
Oh, that's sad.
It's just weak. So I haven't had respect for him ever since then. I think I unfollowed him after that. Like, I haven't even really been reading his stuff like that, because it just showed that, like, you're not, like, this is all performative for you.
Yeah.
It shows.
Well, I mean, you could see it in how shallow his analysis is. Like, like he's not invested in any of this shit. This is just, he's just doing something to get a paycheck.
And he obviously hasn't been paying attention to what's been going on, because, like, stuff he's talking about, if he would have been paying attention, he would have known better.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh, well, we know that you guys have been doing the work, and you've been actually trying to figure out what will actually work, but I don't know anything, but I'm just going to tell you what I think, and you should do that.
Right. No.
All right. So lineage alone shouldn't be the sole qualification because, number one, white people will get all the money. Finally, we have to acknowledge that race is just something white people made up. There's no scientific or medical basis for race. So how does one determine who is an African-American descendant of persons enslaved in the United States? Afforded this special consideration by the state of California. Instead of the descendant part of the proposal, let's focus on the African-American part for a minute. If you think Black immigrants would dilute the pot, how do you feel about white people receiving reparations? According to the Census Bureau, California is 6.5% Black and 72% white. Imagine even half of those Black people could prove their ancestry was tied to slavery. A large-scale DNA study published in the American Journal of Human Genetics concluded that nationwide, about 3.5% of people who identify as white, including around 5% of white Californians, have at least 1% African ancestry. If the task force incorporates the suggestion that lineage can be proven by establishing negative evidence, it is entirely possible that white people could claim the bulk of reparations. Meanwhile, millions of Black American taxpayers who are subject to every iteration of white supremacy wouldn't just be paying the reparations to white people, they would be excluded from cashing in.
We do not pay reparations. Reparations is not paid by taxpayers. Stop saying this stupid shit, Michael Harriot. Sorry.
No, you good. And if you think that's a stretch, consider the man who claimed set-asides for minority businesses by using a DNA test that said he was 90% white and 4% sub-Saharan African. Consider the fact that nearly 2.4 million Hispanic Americans changed their race to white between 2010 and 2020 census. Consider that neither the Census Bureau nor California has a legal definition of what African American means. Finally, here's a story.
Before we read this story, you just made your own stupid ass case. So you're saying, you just said we should pay everybody Black. Now you're saying, but what is Black? And anybody can be Black. Next. Right? He just said it, right?
Yep.
What is Black? Yep. Who is Black? Anybody can be Black, but you just said we should pay everybody who's Black. So if you want us just to pay everybody who's Black, and you worried about white people getting in, so you want us to pay Black immigrants and poor whites too. Okay. I'm not down for it, but that's what you saying. Like, this is stupid. You just, go ahead, sorry. You just going, like, let's pay everybody who's Black. Oh, wait. But if you are worried about Black immigrants getting it, what about the white people? Because they'll just be able to be like, I'm part Black. And it's just like, but you the one saying pay everybody who's Black. We not saying that.
Yeah. And we're definitely not going based off of DNA. This is another thing that people bring up when they don't understand the arguments that are being made. It's like he's completely uninformed. But he wants to speak at authority. Like it's so frustrating that it's almost like people don't take us seriously, like to even like investigate what our arguments are or what our positions are.
Yeah.
And Like they think we're like
Excuse me.
so many people, I guess, that are just, pulling shit out of our asses. It's like, we've been invested in this for a long time.
Exactly.
We've all been going over data. We've been reading books. We've been thinking about how do you actually put this shit together. And we've looked at the experts. Like we're not like a lot of our shit is coming directly from Dr. William Darity, a motherfucker that graduated from MIT.
Exactly, and teaches at Duke.
Yeah, and he's been studying this issue for 30 fucking years.
Yeah.
And you think just because you sat down to write an article on a weekend after you heard some news about a commission out in California that you have all the answers?
And not even that, just the whole idea of whiteness in California. Like white people were going to California during the gold rush, which happened in like the 1840s, right? So from the 1840s to at least 1890, like those white folk that were going west, a lot of them were immigrants from Europe. So majority of the white folk that live in California don't even have African ancestry on me. So it's a small percentage of them that have that. So based off his logic, it's just, I don't know.
And at the end of the day, that's why Darity's requirement is that you have to have marked Black on your birth certificate. On your identification within the past 12 years. So that's how we keep from having $5 Negroes. Right. If you don't know what a $5 Negro is, it comes from a $5 something else. And if you don't know what that is, that's between you and Google.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
And again, the California Commission's eligibilities is saying basically you had to be the descendant, and you have to be an African American descendant of someone who was enslaved in America or a free person prior to the 1900s. So, like, you have to be, a Black American. This is not like you have to be that, and you have to be able to trace your lineage. It's a two-part thing. It's not something that we're allowing white people to just slip in.
Yeah. And also, I would like to take this moment to say that Native Americans decide who's Native American, and I want to be like that as well as Black folks. Because Native Americans, you can prove that you have their blood you could have blood quantum, but if you don't have a connection to their tribe, they don't accept you. Period.
Yep. And we're the same. I don't know you people. It's a bunch of countries on this planet, and you chose the one that intentionally oppresses mine. So we couldn't possibly be the same. But finally, here's a story. In 1891, a lawyer, poet, newspaper opener, doctor, legislator, and civil rights activist from Louisiana named Louis Martinet set up Citizens Committee to test the constitutionality, of the separate car law. The committee was composed of an elite group of free people of color in the New Orleans. The committee was composed of an elite group of free people of color in New Orleans who were accustomed to being treated equally. But after the Civil War, New Orleans Creole leaders worried that they would be treated like the newly emancipated slaves. To stop this segregation thing in its tracks, they recruited another member named Homer Plessy to ride on a segregated streetcar and paid an officer to arrest him. When the case went to trial, Judge Howard Ferguson found him guilty. It was just what the Citizens Committee wanted. They appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, but in a stunning decision, the court upheld the verdict, setting the precedent that would become known as the separate but equal. After the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling said segregation was constitutional, the Jim Crow thing took off. Martinet's family realized that they were second-class citizens and decided to give up the wealth and legacy they had built, leave Louisiana, and become white. A century later, a prominent professor, writer, and historian who spent his career writing about Black intellectuals sat on a patio of a Birmingham restaurant having lunch with a Black writer named Michael Harriot. Halfway through their meal, the professor, who I will not name because I do not know if he has publicly shared this information, revealed that he was a descendant of Louis Martinet, whose family for generations had lived as white people. Martinet is still celebrated as a legend in New Orleans, but the immortality of history ain't got nothing on whiteness. I was fascinated, but I didn't get to hear more because the famous professor was only in town for a few hours. He had to catch a plane back to California. That was his like setup because this guy has been living as white in California for so long.
Oh, awesome, which means he wouldn't get a check, man.
And a lot of those Haitians, quote unquote Haitians, that lived in Louisiana used to be Haitian planters. I will say that again. They fled Haiti because they knew about, Black Haitians killing white folk on the island. So they fled Haiti to come to Louisiana and participate in whatever it is that white Americans do. They wanted to become white. That's the gag. So these Haitians or these French Haitians or whatever that came from Haiti, they were white. You feel me? They were not Black Haitians for the most part. They were wealthy planters from the island of Haiti. Let's get it correct. But anyway.
Especially because in the Haitian Revolution, they started killing the biracials too. So people had to get up out of there. And biracials could be passing. So some of them could have came here and passed, like you said, as white and ran on about.
And then once Louisiana became part of the America that became America as we are, they participated in the institution of slavery, being mulatto or whatnot, and they owned Black folk who were enslaved in Mississippi, Alabama, who were traded to Louisiana, hence why the magnolia flower is the state flower of Louisiana and Mississippi, to name a few. Like, they participated in the institution of slavery, and they built, well, they didn't build, but the folk that were enslaved by these people built an amass of wealth for this country because they had already did it for France and Haiti. Like, bruh, these people were white. So my Haitian grandmother is not that Haitian that went to Louisiana in like 1804. Like, that's not what this is, bruh. Anyway. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
That was the end of the article.
That was, yeah. This article was really terrible.
Yes,
like, you could tell it wasn't well researched. It was just kind of like, this is how I feel, so this is what we should do. And I need Black folks to get out our feelings, because it's not about how you feel, it's about what we can get done legally. And that's what we have to focus on.
Agreed.
My thoughts are, if you were harmed by the legacy of slavery despite not being impacted by slavery, then you'll benefit from reparations without receiving reparations.
Oh, yeah, because now everybody will think that since you're Black that you have money and they'll treat you better.
Yeah.
They'll treat you better.
I just wish for better opponents.
They're so terrible,
I agree
right?
with you, Mon. I agree
Like,
with you, Mon.
oh my God.
Like, I'm getting bored with them. Like
They're terrible.
I used to be sharp because I felt like, at one point, I was being challenged in every which way where, motherfuckers are coming up with unique ways to come at me. Now it's just like, it's the same boring shit. Like, they don't have nothing new. They haven't thought the shit through. They're just,
you feel like Neo in the
emotion.
Matrix? You feel like Neo in the
like,
Matrix when he was fighting what's his name, when he was fighting Mr. Smith, Agent Smith? The first one, he was just doing the arm thing and he's not even looking anymore. He just
yeah, this shit is do better, y'all. Like, if you're gonna be against the shit, like, come harder than this. This is
I
terrible.
agree.
Yeah, who are we calling these people? These are Negro liberals, right? This one?
Yes.
Yeah, like they seem to be like maybe 3 years behind where we are. Like I have these debates very, very often. So the Africans are about 5 to 7 years behind where we are. The Negro liberals are 3 to 5, and the white leftists are 3 to 5. But like everybody's behind us. You'll catch up eventually. Like come 2025, you'll be making the same arguments we are, and we'll be, I don't know, living with the Jetsons somewhere because y'all are just slow.
Yeah.
Facts. What else we got for this? I think we ripped it apart so much as we went through it. It's just bad, poor argument. If he would have done any research, like if he would have actually just paid attention to that last California task force meeting, the one where they actually passed it. I know people have it on video. Like he could have just watched that. You know what I mean? Like go read some reports. Like there's just so much information out here. And it's just you guys throw out these weird arguments that nobody's using, and it's frustrating, it's disrespectful. Please stop trying to commit ethnocide against Black Americans. Black Americans who descend from chattel slavery are their own lineage and their own group. We chose to become a group after slavery, formally, newly freed, long-term freed. We decided to come together and move forward as a group through our struggle, what we had. We are a group because of what has happened to us through the genocides that we have experienced in this country. The same way a Jewish Holocaust person is different than a regular Jewish person. Yes, they're both Jewish. Yes, they have all had to experience things from being Jewish people, but Holocaust survivors have their own separate claim to what has happened to them and have become their own people forged through genocide. I hate to say it like that, but
Well, I just want to end by giving a shout out to Marcel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because Marcel and Marcel Dixon, who's been on the candidate in for the 6th district in South Carolina, who's been on our network on critical justice, had a debate with Michael Harriot, and he kicked Michael Harriot's ass. Like it was disgusting. Like I felt embarrassed for Michael Harriot.
Sir. Me too.
So, and I don't know. It's like y'all better get y'all shit together, because a lot of y'all like who have been in this space, like in Black politics, as like cultivating a career as being like some type of thought leader, y'all gonna fuck around and let this reparation issue destroy your careers. Because after that debate, like anybody that listened to that shit, I couldn't see why you would want to read anything that Michael Harriot has ever written or is going to write in the future, because like he looked like an imbecile.
I told you after that Pete Buttigieg thing, I didn't look at him the same way. The more he opens himself up, he gets exposed. He should only write. He should never speak in public.
But see, there's a lot of people that are like on his side of this, that are in that space, and they just haven't like jumped out there like he did. I'm telling y'all, don't do it. Don't fuck around and get into a situation where the reparation is talking the shit, because we are going to eat you the fuck up.
We'll eat you alive. Mm-hmm.
And any other Black people who are kind of like on the fence that don't really know what's going on, when they see you get ate up like that, they're not going to fuck with you no more. It's going to be the end of your career.
Facts.
Not gonna lie, Harriet, you looking real Michael Eric Dyson-ish.
And you see Michael Eric Dyson got his stuff together recently.
I don't trust him.
Nah, I don't trust him either, but yeah.
Because they're trying to figure out how because this is the thing, right? And I said this the other day on Tim's show when I called in. The problem is all these so-called Black thought leaders that have been appointed not by us, all these so-called Black leaders, they have not had to answer to Black folks. So now that we are watching what they do, what they say, and they have to answer to us. Remember, in the beginning, everybody had an attitude and was blowing us off. But as the ranks grow bigger, and the thing about it is people who aren't even hardcore on the internet are still getting up on this, like, why is stuff happening for everybody else but not for us? Like, our people are waking up, whether they're online or off. So now you have to answer for the stuff you do. Like what happened with Maxine Waters when those people were making her answer. You have to answer for the things you say, the things you do. You don't get to just run out here and say crazy things and then think nobody's gonna make you answer for what you say. And I think it's good. I think we lack accountability in our community and we need to take it back, especially if you decide you want to represent us.
Yep.
Absolutely. And no amount of AAV you slide in or hip hop references is going to get you past these BS arguments you've been making. Like,
especially because he don't even sound like that. Like when you listen to him speak, he don't sound like how he write. It's performative.
He sound hood adjacent, like close enough to understand the terms, but not like to own them.
Yeah.
It's definitely giving mockery. Like, you can tell he's used to being like the only Negro around or the only Black person around, pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
And he just plays that up. And like, again, I typically don't mind these kinds of people because like you see them. And as long as you're out here selling out, I really don't mind. But now you're getting in the way of reparations.
And that's a problem. And we are not playing those games anymore.
It was entertaining when you were going at Tulsi Gabbard, calling a rogue from X-Men. That was hilarious. But the buck does stop when you start getting in the way of Black people. Like, you're in a position where you could spend your whole entire day talking shit about white people, explaining why Black people need reparations. And instead, you decided to get in the way and try to muddy up the claim.
Exactly.
These people are not.
Get us some $5 Negroes.
If you're really so interested in people who weren't impacted by things receiving reparations, how about you go get my Igbo reparations from Nigeria?
Facts.
My Biafra reparations. I want those. I'm Black too, ain't I? I might even be Igbo, low-key. I might be part Igbo, part Irish. We got some interesting things going on here in America. I'm just there. I want my check, and I want these Harriot, Michael Eric Dyson types to just stop it. Go find something better to do.
The thing is, their time is up. Like, I hate to say it, but y'all time is up. And I'm not saying like, but your guys' time is up. There's gonna be a new crop. Like Marcel, the way that he can spit out his facts and go through and talk through everything. But to be honest, like Michael Harriot, anybody could have ate up Michael Harriot. Like, there's people who barely know anything that could have ate Michael Harriot up in that conversation. But like, whew. Oh, Mud's back.
Hey, Mud.
Welcome back, Mud. But yeah, like, they're gonna get replaced because we are at a moment that Black Americans, descendants of chattel slavery, want the Black people who are writing, talking, who are representing us, who are in front of us to be fighting for us. And if you are not, we don't want you no more. Because I can watch the white person.
Yeah.
We've been watching white people on TV forever. So why should I want to watch a Black person using white talking points? I might as well watch Becky.
Rest in peace to the Black News Network or channel, whatever that was.
Oh yeah, that's dead. That died so quickly.
You know what the crazy thing was? Even in their little thing, it was like to serve Black and brown communities. Then why didn't you call it the Black and Brown News Network? Y'all playing games, but all right. Alrighty then, y'all. I'm out of here. I'm gonna go paint. I'll talk to y'all later.
Marcel kicked your ass, Mr. Postman.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, he did for real.
Yes, he did. Thank you for having me.
Listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Back on the grill again, we grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out we're really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to US Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings, we are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one, cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire, anti-black, we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country, the win, you need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Back on the grill again, we grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out we're really about justice and really who fake.
Until you do right by me, everything you think about is gonna crumble.
Join us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Reset Race Network.
I just wanted to say that reparations is not your piece of the American pie.
Facts.
You are not welcome. This is Negro pie over here.
All we want is some coffee and a couple of slices of pie. Is that all right?
No, these are whites-only pies.
But do you have any Negro pies?
Hey, Claude, come on now. This woman ain't got